A huge day by any estimation, and we've been covering the shutdown, we've been covering the removal of Secretary Mattis, we've been covering the plunging stock markets. There's another gigantic story that we've been reporting on, and I have two great experts here for it, and it is impacting the Mueller probe. So let me walk you through this because it also is part of what's going on and heating up the White House. The acting Attorney General, Trump loyalist Matt Whitaker, well, he has put out word today, this is also news today, he's going to oversee the Mueller probe himself. His Justice Department saying there's no reason for him to recuse like Jeff Sessions. But then, swiftly today, a scandal reports that it's only happening because Whitaker's advisors actually rejected the formal counsel from ethics officials that he should recuse. Now, the man who could be more important than acting AG is Trump's pick for a permanent AG. Eleanor and I just discussing how the Senate will deal with this. Well, tonight, Washington has been pouring over a secret memo that this man wrote to the Trump administration outlining arguments against Mueller's obstruction inquiry. What that means tonight is we now know something we didn't know yesterday. The man Trump picked to be Mueller's boss was also privately serving as something more like Mueller's opposing counsel, sending this lengthy memo to the Trump administration arguing Mueller's approach to potential obstruction was, quote, fatally misconceived, and that moving forward with it would risk damage to the presidency. Barr was writing based on public information, which means the kind of stuff you or I or anyone might know. And today, this was also so important on this big news night. Today, Mueller's longtime boss cited that fact to pour some cold water on Barr's past advice.
Lots of people offer opinions to the Department of Justice, but they don't influence our own decision-making. Our decisions are informed by our knowledge of the actual facts of the case, which Mr. Barr didn't have. And also, a lot of the reactions initially this afternoon to this Barr memo note how it does disagree with Mueller, as I just told you, and they suggest it could be bad news for Mueller if Barr is his new boss, confirmed by the Senate. But let me tell you this. Some people may be putting too much stock in certain parts of the memo. To quote a famous rule of thumb, the Barr memo may not mean what they think it means.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Let me explain why. Barr's criticism of Mueller's obstruction theory is limited because he says there's only two actions that Trump took that could be obstruction, firing Comey and asking him to drop the Flynn investigation. But what Barr may not have known or fully appreciated when he wrote this is all the other reports that would detail more evidence of obstruction. And so Barr has now put into writing an argument that Mueller can use against Trump. He actually highlights, I want to show you this, actions by a president that would amount to obstruction crimes, writing, quote, obviously the president could commit obstruction, and then describing the acts. Barr says could be crimes. In other words, crimes by Trump. So let's go through it, because this, what I'm about to show you, may send chills down Rudy Giuliani's back tonight. Barr writes that a president can commit criminal obstruction by encouraging what? Perjury.
It's called flipping, and it almost ought to be illegal.
Donald Trump called Michael Cohen a rat.
That's the President of the United States calling his former lawyer there a rat for cooperating, which might fail that Barr standard. Then Barr also writes in this newly public memo, a president commits criminal obstruction potentially by pushing a witness to change testimony.
A tweet storm unleashed this morning. I will never testify against Trump. This statement was recently made by Roger Stone. Nice to know that some people still have guts.
Maybe Barr didn't know he'd be describing something that ends up in the strike zone of criminal obstruction. You have Trump there basically encouraging a potential witness not to testify. And lastly, before I bring in our experts, Barr writes in this newly released memo, a president can commit obstruction by impairing the availability of evidence.
President Trump ordered the firing of special counsel Robert Mueller back in June.
Let's get into it. Nick Ackerman, a former Watergate special prosecutor, and Melissa Murray, law professor at NYU, who has clerked for Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor. And I believe I have NBC's Ken Delanian standing by as well on this busy night. Our first-time guest, Professor, I go to you. Does Barr end up outlining things that he says could be presidential crimes that look like things that Donald Trump has now done?
Well, Barr has done something that I would tell any first-year law student not to do, which is to make assumptions based on facts that you don't have. So he's laid out this 19-page memo, but as Rosenstein says, he's operating in the dark, and he doesn't know a lot of the things that are happening, and he doesn't know what's yet to come. And as you say, the president has done a lot of things that may seem like acts that would fall into some of the things outlined by Barr in that memo. So he's auditioning for a job that he may not want.
There's no question. I mean, first of all, he doesn't take into account the whole myriad of facts that we have. I mean, after this date of this memo, which is June 8th, all kinds of things happened after that date. But if you look at this memo, this looks like something that was written by a second or third year law student who never
he is the former Attorney General of the United States. He outranked you, sir.
He certainly did. But I'll tell you something. If I got this from an associate in my firm, I would be horrified.
You would?
He would. First of all, he's got the wrong obstruction statute that he identifies. He identifies the witness tampering statute, not the standard obstruction 1503 statute, which he claims only applies to proceedings.
So bottom line, throw some of the numbers out.
Right.
Are you saying that you think he was stretching because he was auditioning for the job?
He certainly was stretching because he was auditioning for the job. This is a job letter. But what's even worse is it shows that somebody who is a former attorney general doesn't understand obstruction of justice. And in and of itself, forget the conflict, forget what he said to the president. I wouldn't hire this guy to be a law clerk based on this memo.
Doesn't understand, or in this instance, as lawyers sometimes do, doesn't want to understand.
Well, maybe he wants to understand different things. So the middle part of the letter is a love letter to the unitary executive theory, which posits that all of the power of the executive branch is vested in the president and cannot really be checked by Congress. And if you are auditioning for the role of attorney general, that's exactly what you want to say to appeal to this particular president.
Ken Dilanian, you are out there reporting, and you have news on the future of the Mueller probe. What is it?
That's right, Ari, and it may make Barr's memo moot, because what we're reporting tonight is that Robert Mueller is wrapping up his investigation and may submit a report to the Justice Department as early as mid-February, when Matthew Whitaker presumably will still be the acting attorney general, because it'll be difficult to get Barr confirmed by that point. This is some deep reporting that I've got with Pete Williams, and frankly, I was surprised by this reporting. I had thought that there were many months left to go in this probe, but we've talked to a number of people associated with it, obviously many people who have clients in the case, but more than that, government officials and people who are in a position to know, Ari, and all the signs are pointing to Mueller wrapping things up and submitting a report. Now, what we haven't been
Ken, I'm
able
not
to
going to
learn-
press you on the identity of your sources, but I was speaking to a former prosecutor with a similar job last night, Ken Starr, who certainly leaked more than Mueller. What can you tell us about why people should understand this to be an important timeline that is rooted in what they're going to do when they famously don't leak or talk that much?
Right, they don't leak, but people do need to be ready for this to happen, because it's not just the Mueller team anymore once they file the report. The regulations say that Robert Mueller is required to file a confidential report to the Attorney General of the United States. And then it's up to him to decide what to do with it, whether to make it public, whether to submit it to Congress. And there's going to be a lot of issues around that, around classified information, grand jury secrecy material. And so if it's going to be made public, there's going to have to be a decision about what to do with that.
And that collides and combines with the other big story we're reporting tonight, Ken, which is that would then be Whitaker's call if your reporting timeline's correct.
That's right. And so you have a Matthew Whitaker, an acting attorney general, who has disregarded the informal advice he got from a Justice Department ethics officer that, all things considered, he probably should recuse himself because there's an appearance of impartiality based on the many critical comments he made about the Mueller investigation. He said there was no collusion on television. Now, he has told associates that he was acting as a television commentator back then without information. That was a role that he had. He's in a much different role now. He has promised to follow the rules of the Justice Department, but he's setting a standard here, which is that the appearance of impartiality is not enough for recusal. And William Barr is going to have the same issue.
With the 30 seconds I have, let me take your reporting to Melissa and say, if it's up to Whitaker, does that mean this report is less likely to get to Congress?
Well, I think if it's up to Whitaker and he stays in this role, the real issue that we have is the broad appearance of impropriety, and I think it's likely that this doesn't go to Congress, and that is a failure of the public trust.
My thanks to you and Nick and Ken Dilanian on a big, busy hour. As we learned, Secretary of Defense out, shutdown looming. Democrats saying they are shaken by what they saw today. And chaos, the word of the evening. A lot more to come. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.